College. Vardit is a senior lecturer in the Department of Arabic at the University of Haifa. She wrote one of the first books, actually, on Islamic medical ethics in English. In addition, I guess most people of you know that, in addition to her many publications, she was the chief organizer of the International Conference on Medical Law and Ethics in Islam, held in Haifa in March of 2001, which in a sense can be seen as the predecessor conference to this one. And she has just completed a new monograph on disability in Islamic law. So, welcome.
Thank you. First, I apologize to Professor Prokop and to all the participants for not arriving on time, and it needed to do all kinds of changes. And I really appreciate your understanding and your welcome. My topic today is contemporary Muftis between bioethics and social reality, pre-selection of the sex of the fetus as a paradigm. In his outline for how to do the presentation and not to read the paper itself from the beginning to end, John suggested that we share with you how I came to deal with the subject. So it's a bit funny, I think. I don't know how many of you are aware of the Dayan Center in the Tel Aviv University in Israel. They have an archive of about 2,000 newspapers, journals in Arabic from all over the Islamic and Arab world. So once in a while, I'm taking a whole day going there, and I'm hunting for fatwas. That's my hobby. And from reading the medical fatwas, and I'm pretty fast sorting what's medical and what's other stuff, I get in those once or two times a year, I get the sense for what's new, what's hot, what's the issue at the time, because those things are repeating themselves, and you'll see more muftis interested in something that they didn't do when I browsed through the material a year ago or so. So I've noticed in the last 3, 4, 5 years that among the hot topics are pre-selection of the sex of the embryo research, stem cells, and more or less these issues. Much less cloning and things of this sort, but really anything that is connected to the embryo. So as I see my topic of pre-selection, the question is actually a result of advanced science. I don't remember where I read it, but for instance, the problem of brain death wasn't an issue of debate before the EEG and before people realized that there is brain death and there is another death. Beforehand, people just waited for seeing the seizure of the respiratory system and the heart, and that's it. Once they learned that there is another way to measure things, then things become again questionable. So the same is about the pre-selection of the sex. Now, for social reasons that I will not be able to go into now, there are many countries and many cultures that prefer boys to girls. And that's not new. It's not. It didn't start today. It started, I think, as early as human civilization. And the reasons were economic, military, matters of honor and prestige, and so forth. The fact that infanticide is still going on today in several parts of the world, such as India, China, and other places, is an indication that the sex of the child or the embryo first is still very important. Now, we know that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the Quran, they speak against what? Against infanticide. The fact that they speak about it may be by itself an indicator that was a custom, that it existed. In an article by Professor Giladi about infanticide in early Islam, He claims that infanticide didn't stop until even in 11th and 11th to the 16th centuries. You still see texts that speak against infanticide in Islam, and he understands it that the custom wasn't completely eradicated despite the teachings of the Quran, of the Sunnah, etc. The Sunnah takes a lot of effort to teach us that girls should get education as well as boys, and not to be influenced from what people are saying, but be only guided by Allah. And all these emphasis that girls are equal to boys. There are hadiths that say that if someone is teaching his slave girl a couple of verses of the Quran, he is getting such a huge reward in the hereafter, definitely unproportional to the effort he invested. But the idea is to show that the girls are worth investing in and that they have a room in society. Again, this might be an indication for an opposite social situation. In the Middle Ages, we know that the physicians were interested in instructing and giving advice of how to bring about the birth of boys versus girls. There were all kinds of suggestions of beginning from food and special waters, continuing with forms of intercourse, weathers to consider what weather is better to bring about the birth of boys, etc., and so forth. Then we have a lot of signs in the medieval literature to find out if the woman is already pregnant, does she carry a boy or a girl? All kinds of physical signs. Usually the boy is associated with the right part of the body. The right nipple on the wife's body changes its color. She starts walking with the right leg, etc. And I guess right has a very positive connotation, and it is associated with boys. We even find in the medieval literature that you can test what the sex of the embryo is by some special seed that the wife is supposed to chew on, and if it changes the taste in her mouth, it's called zarawand. And I needed to consult the anthropologist Aref Abu Rabia from Beersheba University to find out what this zarawand is about, because I didn't find it beforehand. Apparently, it is some seed that influences the labor contractions, and also afterwards the contractions of the uterus returning to its original size. Well, in modern times, the importance of the male sperm in determining the sex of the child was, according to my sources, was known from 1924 onwards. Then they realized that there are the chromosomes X and Y, and of course the man who is the one who contributes the Y chromosome to create a male. In the recent time, the science that all the fatwas are responding to, and that's something I was lucky in my delay in LA to talk to a physician that apparently exactly that's what he does for a living, is pre-testing the fertilized ovum before transplanting it into a woman's womb. And the science, the pure science, as far as I understand, and I'm not a scientist, are two main methods. One is sorting the sperm before any fertilization to X spermatozoids and Y spermatozoids. And the second one is biopsying the embryo when it is on the third day, something like 8 cells altogether. They take one cell out and they examine for the DNA, and they can verify then whether it is a boy or a girl. Now, the sorting before fertilization, according to this physician, gives a 75% assurance for boys and 95% assurance that it is a girl. The biopsy of the 8 cells embryo gives 100% assurance that it is a boy or a girl. I'll mention it here, but it's not that important at this moment that amniocentesis was also and is used also in some parts. You know, you can examine a 16 weeks pregnant woman, and you can find out whether she carries a boy or a girl, but that already verges on a complete different subject of abortion, because if she is pregnant 16 weeks with the so-called unwanted gender of the baby, then abortion is the only solution to select the sex there. So what are the reasons to select the sex of the embryo today? One of them is medical. A lot of genetic diseases are attached to the X chromosome. So if there is knowledge that the mother has some genetic disease that might transfer to the embryo, then if we avoid all X carriers to come to the world, in other words, we'll avoid bringing about the birth of girls for this woman, then we probably can avoid this genetic disease from occurring. A byproduct of all these tests is also that you can check for sick genes, the single gene defects. You can check also during that stage of pre-implementation. I think that to the medical side, we should add also the psychological well-being. And we see that a lot in the fatwas, that sometimes mothers who have too many, especially girls, and there is a lot of pressure and I say intolerance on the side of her husband, that if she gives birth to one more girl, he would, God forbid, divorce her, or he would abuse her, etc. Then I would consider that also a psychological or even a well-being issue of the mother. There are social reasons to check to pre-select the sex of the embryo. One of them is shame. Another one is disappointment. There is a title in Arabic for a man who doesn't bear boys. He is called abtar. That means that something is cut off. Actually, he is not the nasab. The genealogical lines would not follow from him onwards, because if he has only girls, they are not responsible for the nasab. And there are economic reasons. Still, in most of the world, the man is the food provider. Women in the third world, in many other places, are not money earners, or they cannot provide by themselves for the families, and therefore there is a preference for the males. In the Jewish text, I found a very interesting reason why a man wanted specifically to check in recent years that the transplanted ovum into his wife would be definitely that of a girl and not a boy. And the reason was that he was a Kohen, meaning he was of priestly Jewish origin. And they transferred the priestlyhood only from father to son. And on the 13th birthday, they have the bar mitzvah, the ceremony of maturation, so to say, and the new guy who is 13, the young man, is called to the Torah by the name of his father, so-so, the son of so-so, the priest. And if the father was priest, then he is also a Kohen. Now, this guy said, when this child, 13 years ahead of now, would be called to the Torah, and he is not a Kohen because he is not born from my seed, and everyone would know that that was a donated sperm, then everyone would know that I was sterile. So to avoid the problem 13 years in advance, he said, I'd better have girls and not boys. So that's, I'd say, some social reason to select the sex of the embryo. Now, the questions that raise themselves a lot about medicine and science. I wouldn't say versus science, because it's medicine and science. And I've seen it a lot in Egyptians' fatwas that I mapped once for their attitude to science. There is always a mention. Oh, really? 5 minutes?
Yeah, it's because we have.
Oh, okay, okay.
Who wants to respond?
Okay, so some of the ideas are that who is more accurate, the physicians or Allah? Obviously, Allah has superiority because the Quran says Allah bestows boys and girls upon whoever He wishes. It is said that ilm al-attiba dhanni wa ilm Allah yaqini. The knowledge of the physicians is speculative, while the knowledge of Allah is it's unchangeable. Besides, all the wisdom that the physicians know comes from Allah, and all the science originates from Allah. And that's why basically many of the Muftis eventually permit sex selection. And I can mention only, for instance, Al-Qaradawi and Az-Zuhaili as an example. And the reason is that Allah is believed to be standing behind the creation of every embryo. So the doctors may try, they can do the best they want, they use science, but they cannot assure 100% knowledge. The doctors know to diagnose the sex after the sperm exists or after the fertilized ovum exists, and they check it in the lab. It is claimed that Allah knows the result of the meeting of that sperm and ovum even before they had even met. So since I have very little time, I'll go to my summary. All in all, I was myself surprised to find out that so many Muftis are for and did not object to the pre-selection of the sex of the embryo. One of the main reasons I thought they would be against it, that it does create imbalance between men and female, males and females in society. And God created the world fi ahsan taqwim, in a very balanced way. Aren't we giving the doctors here a tool to actually manipulate it? Then if there are less women, who will those men marry? Aren't we going here against the be fruitful and multiply? Where would procreation go on? So the bottom line is that the Muftis say that on a personal level, pre-selection is okay, but not on a national huge mass allowance that everyone will select whatever they want. So not everything is permitted and not everything is forbidden. That's Mufti's saying. All depends on the circumstances. And there are special instructions where and when to do the pre-selection. Add to that the fact that the doctor must be a thika. That means that the doctor himself must be a trustworthy person, and I cannot go into it, but thika is a whole package of many qualities, moral, inborn and acquired, and integrity of the physician that is required from the Muslim physician in everything they do. And what they claim the reason for pre-selection, to allow pre-selection, is that there is maslaha. Now, if we weigh masalih did mafasid, advantages versus disadvantages, the result is that the Muslim muftis on a general basis are for, or they are not against at least, pre-selection of the sex of the embryo. One more comment about this process of weighing advantages against detriments. I've seen this process taking place with the question of genetic counseling. Should we look for genetic counseling or not against masalih versus mafasid? About embryo research, about stem cell research, about artificial insemination, when that was a new topic. Now it's, I think, more than 25 years old in the discussion of muftis. But you see the system of weighing the negative versus the positive. And my last word here, that I think that you can bend the maslaha. You can find more small ideas within the idea and show that you have more maslaha than mafsada if you wish to. And I would refer you here to a recent article by Opwis that appeared in Islamic Law and Society in 2005 about maslaha, in which she surveys the maslaha from Middle Ages but until the present. And in present time, she actually, I think it's she.
I think so.
Yeah, it's she. In present times, she equates maslaha with ijtihad, which means that it leaves enough room for the muftis when the texts are a bit succinct, then they can impose their ijtihad. And why do they do that? I think because there is a mass demand on the side of the public. Yes, there is a demand on the public, I think, to help them with this social issue that there is the preference of the boys. And the muftis, I think, in a way, try to answer here some public need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would suggest that we just go now to Hamza Eskandarani's paper, and we will have also a respondent, Ersilia, here. So we would just will listen to all the three of them in a row, and then I guess, because especially the papers really are linked to each other. So our next speaker is Hamza Ali Eskandarani. He is an associate professor at the Department of Biochemistry at King Faisal University, Saudi Arabia. He also holds a doctoral degree in medical biochemistry from the University of Manchester. Dr. Eskandarani has authored several research publications and presented at several conferences on genetics and medical practices in the Middle East, the most recent one being cystic fibrosis, transmember regulator gene mutations in Bahrain. He also maintains an active interest in medical ethics and has written extensively on assisted reproductive techniques in Saudi Arabia, and this is what his paper will be about now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank the panel and also the organizers, especially for this conference, especially Professor Prokop. I'd like to actually stand because I feel like a layman duck sitting here. You know, I'll go to sleep, so might as well just do a bit of refreshment. The topic, how do you just go down that way? Huh? Go down from this, yeah? The gun like, huh? Yeah, okay. But we have to actually go through just quick facts here. As you know here, for the last 3 decades, ART has helped many people to overcome this debility, social debility actually, for having the lack of offspring, as it were. And the ART achieved, well, an average better conception rate than 30%. The natural is actually around 25%, but this is 30, even sometimes almost reaching 47%, I believe, in some centers. And incidentally, in the Islamic world, there are about 180 million infertile people. So we are talking about 12 to 15% of the population suffer from one time of infertility. So 180 million, that's a staggering number. And of course, you will appreciate what we go through when we spell out the dilemmas, because that's too much pressure. And as it is true in the Islamic world and all over the world, the use of the human gametes and also embryos is quite provoked intensive, actually, religious and ethical moral debate all over the world. And that's why we think, personally, I think of it here, if every discipline has its own code of ethics, then the zenith of medical ethics concern ART practice, simply because of the sensitivity and the taboo subject, and the social demand, and of course is medical. And the third, which is most important, is we're talking about evolving technologies. We are going now through cloning and so on and so forth. So that's why it is a very sensitive issue. And you will probably agree with me when we spell out the dilemmas here. So what are the clear stance in the Islamic world, specifically here in the GCC countries? GCC country meaning the Gulf Council, Cooperative Council, which means here 7 countries, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Yemen, the Emirates, Kuwait, Oman, and did I miss out? Bahrain, and Qatar. Okay, 7 countries. All right. Of course, they have legalized the ART now for more than 16, 17 years, and there's a total prohibition of donation of any kind. No donor eggs, no donor, of course, sperms, and of course no donor embryos. No surrogacy program. And here also there is one thing that they have to make sure is to negate any excusable means which might lead to unforeseen consequences. That's why we have to wait for fatwas in that case. What are the dilemmas then in that? Here we have 3 types of dilemmas: ethical dilemmas, legal dilemmas, and social dilemmas. Sorry. Can I go back to this? Yes. Because we have these different types of dilemmas, and these are stemming from so many reasons. It's because we have unclear position for the IVF team on certain aspects of treatment modes, not enough information supplied by the authorities, and that's why we have here reproductive health under question, and that was reproductive medicine under question. And the subject of infertility is rather taboo subject. That is, of course, reproductive awareness. The ethical dilemma revolves around about here. It comes from the fact that we have the status of the couples receiving infertility treatment, the number of embryos to be transferred, and the mandatory presence of husband during embryo transfer. As you know, in Islam, if the husband is not around, maybe he could be dead. You see, so it has to be the husband should be around at the time of embryo transfer. The fate of supernumerary embryos, as we talked, Dr. Eich talked about that, and the cryopreservation of gametes, embryos, and tissues. Other ethical dilemmas is on the decision to select suitable embryos for PGD program, and decision to opt for embryo reduction in case of multiple pregnancy. And also there is research aspects on the introduction of new techniques, when possible, of course, genetic manipulation, and the last to talk about the nuclear transfer. So these are ethical issues with relations to the ERT in the Gulf states. The legal dilemmas is the absence of statutory body which regulates the practice of ERT. If present, may lack the clear regulations and guidelines to the code of practice. And also probably here may lack the power to take action to revoke licenses if the conditions were not met. And the absence of clear regulations and guidelines to directions and limitation to research. Social dilemma is here that the definition of medical technology terminologies are not yet fulfilled. Lack of information to the public, probably. Procedures are not understood, absence of social workers. And the social demand. Social demand is actually where here there is a fear of gametes and embryo mix-up, sex pre-selection, sense of guilt not to admit infertility, financial burden, and also the cloning misconception. What is the effect, the bystander effects as a result of all these dilemmas? You find that here the treatment team or the IVF team, they often face the difficulties to wait for, to exercise their right, and also the absence of recognition for training on ART. It will also affect here the no direction to research and hindrance to the annual national registry of each country. And some patients in that case may not continue IVF, and this creation, they think of the creation of the embryo extracorporeal at all. So this is affecting the patients to come forward, some group of patients. So in this case, our aim here of the study is to survey the possible presence and implementation of rules and regulations for the ART practice in the Gulf states, which include these countries, I talked about them, and also show the standpoint to any detrimental effects which could lead to as a result of non-compliance of such regulations. What are the materials and the methods we use here? A questionnaire consisted of 2 tables. I have given you the 2 tables, and they are consisting of about 40 questions, and involved actually all 50 IVF centers, which will serve about 50 million people in the region. Unfortunately, not all of them responded. It's only about, I think, 17 or 19. And the collected data was, it was actually analyzed using the SPSS. Here are the centers. You can see in Saudi Arabia you have about 27 centers. Some of them, the majority are private centers, and the King Faisal Specialist Hospital 2 and National Guard and Ministry of Health, only about 1 or 2 here. But the neighboring countries, we have 3 in Bahrain, and Kuwait is about almost 9 or 10. And the United Arab Emirates and Oman, there is 1, and Doha, and Qatar, and Yemen, 1 each. Unfortunately, in Yemen, there's only 1 center serves about 18.5 million, so it's really underestimated. What are the results? Out of these 50, 16, I made a mistake, I said 19, I was too optimistic, but anyway, 16 centers came forward with the answers. 9 from Saudi Arabia, 2 from Bahrain, and 1 from each. And we then used this statistical analysis using different types of actually testing in order to do comparative studies, because we do not have many data from the other countries except 9 centers from Saudi Arabia, so we thought of doing comparative study rather than looking at each. And of course, we don't have to go through the table. You have the tables there. It's just that we look at the total score. When you look at this total score, we have the government's regulations with relations to here the legalization, and compare that to the actual regulation done by the center. So you find that they didn't do badly here. But compare that to, this is for Saudi Arabia, comparing it to the other GCC countries. So here it's rather underestimated. When we go to the other table, when we talk about, for instance, the average score for the guidelines related to each treatment cycle, for instance, you ask a gynecologist how many should we have here stipulations and to the number of embryos to be transferred, or embryo reduction and sex preselection and so on and so forth. So they have provided their own rules and regulations and so on.
Can you explain what numerical scores mean to those that are not familiar with
Okay, when we talk about here the figures, meaning that if high score saying that I really strongly recommend that there should be here rules and regulation with regards to all of these questions. The number of embryos, the transfer, and sex preselection. Should you have rule and regulation by the government? If the government does not provide you with that, should you devise your own rule and regulation? Do you have that one? And the highest score is 4 for yes, I recommend. I do, and then could be plus and minus maybe, or not necessarily, and 0 is not available. So that's why you go from that scale, and that's why you weigh out your figures and do the calculation, and you score on the table. This is just to continue here, but I will summarize it in the conclusions and of the results. And when we look at this, the comparative study of the average score between, say, legislative measures done in Saudi Arabia, compare it to the actual other GCCs. So if you have the legislation here, 41 compared to the other GCCs, which is 30. And that's a significant figure here. When we look at the guidelines, although this is probably a bias because only one center, say from Qatar, one center from Bahrain, 2 centers from Bahrain, it's not much data you can get. There are only 1 center, one in Oman, so I don't have any other center to forward that. But in Saudi Arabia, we have 27. So the guidelines here, whether the center has provided this compared to Saudi Arabia, we see that here the other GCCs scored higher than Saudi Arabia's because we have very small number. Anyhow, but the fact that here remains is that we have to look at what are when to discuss the results and discuss the projection here, the importance of the questions here. The control of ERT practice is really, in its widest terms, was tightly or almost tightly followed. And also there is here a lack of effective legislative regulations and proper guidelines for the legalization of the ERT practice, because because the standard deviation is high and the numbers are not appealing. And also here we have a shortage of regulations and guidelines to the detailed treatment cycles. And also we have the ambiguity among professionals for offering certain aspects of treatment service, such as sex preselection and embryo reduction. In conclusion, then we have the statutory body in each GCC country compromised on the surveillance and the mechanism of imposing retribution to the violations, and dismissal of the national and regional ART registry. Many centers may contemplate on certain aspects of treatment cycles, and the patients find difficulties in understanding ART. So what are then if we criticize this, there is a lack on this, whether it is the government not stipulating enough rules and regulations to follow, or the centers did not come forward with this rules and regulations. So what do you then recommend as a solution? The recommendation is to really establish a committee or authority on human embryology and fertilization. It's just on ERT, just similar to the HIFIA, Human Embryology and Fertilization Authority in the UK. And the aim is, of course, to formulate such establishment and by the government, and to take an action in actually stipulating the code of practice, which is relying on the code of ethics. There are general objectives here, 2 central goals: to set the certain rules and guide and regulation to be followed by all practicing ART, and also to supervise the compliance by the centers to set the rule and the regulations. The specific objectives here, once, of course, you have established such a committee, then that committee should, in fact, establish the code of practice, issue treatment licenses, access daily procedure, and so on and so forth. And the responsibilities here is to look at the IVF treatment and cryopreservation licenses, license to each practicing member of the team, and also micromanipulation licenses. And to go into further points about the responsibilities, we have to look at the action that should be taken to suspend license from any violations by the center, and also take disciplinary action against offenders and carry out continuous supervision by the center. The last responsibilities, of course, is to evaluate and conduct a routine check to all activities, check all logbooks of the center, make sure that the treatment, the actually treated patients have been checked for all the necessary tests, and supervise here publications. The instrumental success for all of that, if we have laws and regulations without stipulating here discipline, and make sure that they are disciplined by the center, by the techniques that they use, and also the good intention and niyyah. What is it? Are you really offering sex pre-selection just for the sake of money, or because of there is really a need? And also, for instance, reduction. When you do embryo reduction, should we talk about really some certain fatwas say you can't actually do embryo reduction because that is a threat to the mother? But which embryo do you choose? You see, what's the intention? So they are equally competent. And the attitude of the doctors towards the treatment of the patients, what they expect from doctors, and so on. And the proper, of course, reproductive health practice. So I would like to acknowledge all these centers, and also Dr. Mona Hassan, who is a social professor who done the statistical analysis. And last but not least, I just would like to ask you to look at these two questions. What do you think of the Islamic views towards the endorsement of such evolving ART? And second is how to help implementing important measures for better control to such needed technology. I really thank you for listening, and I'm sorry if I took extra time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation about the GCC countries. Actually, I have to admit that I was not provided with any information about the respondent, Ersilia. So I don't know, like respondents don't get introduced or something.
No.
So Ersilia Francesca from the University of Naples will now respond to these two papers.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, the question on when human life begins is a profoundly intricate one, with a widespread implication ranging from abortion right to stem cell research and beyond. A key point in the debate rests on the way in which we choose to define the concept of human being. Is a zygote or an embryo a human being? This is a crucial question that often gives rise to an intense debate, for its answer is used as evidence in the answers to questions about the moral status of a zygote, embryo, or fetus. The question on when human life begins has been pondered throughout history and in a multitude of cultural contexts. Historically, the answer has been coupled with the issue of abortion. As people tried to determine at what stage abortion was acceptable, they often confronted the question as to when abortion should be considered destruction of a human life. As it is well known, according to the Islamic tradition, the ensoulment takes place at 120 days after conception. Therefore, many Muslim scholars argue that terminating the life of an embryo before ensoulment is allowed, although regarded as disliked, while it is considered as forbidden after this stage. This conclusion is particularly important for discussion concerning not only abortion, but also research on human embryo, stem cell research, the patenting of genes, and cloning. Nowadays, certain application of biotechnology and genetics arose a profound fear and anxiety that the sanctity of human life might be compromised and human dignity violated if careful ethical consideration is not given to this application. Responding to a question on genetic research, the eminent Muslim scholar Yusuf al-Qaradawi states that Islam welcomes the idea of genetic engineering on condition that it is useful for the benefit of humanity and that its guidelines will be according to the views of qualified jurists. He says, I quote, "There are many benefits we can derive from this, for instance, in treating genetic diseases by using the effective genes to prevent harm and disease. This is something commendable in Islam according to the legal rule, prevention is better than cure. The rule is taken from the hadith, there should be neither harm nor reciprocating of injury." This, end of quotation. The Islamic Fiqh Academy addressed some ethical guidelines on genetic engineering. It decides that it's permissible to conduct any research, carrying out any treatment or even diagnosis with the intention to tamper with the genes of a certain human being without undertaking the prior accurate evaluation to the possible future harms and benefits related to this research or that diagnosis. Gene therapy that is meant to completely alter the creation of the whole body or even single body organ is categorically prohibited, while there is nothing wrong in carrying out any gene therapy that is meant to treat the former genus with the aim of restoring it to the normal shape. Also, there is nothing wrong with gene therapy whose aim is to rectify the fact that causes physical or psychological aim. In his paper on fetal gene therapy, Arshi Farooqui, who was supposed to be here, summarizes the attitude, and I suppose many of you have read the paper, summarizes the attitude of the Sunni schools of law on the fetal gene therapy. It starts from the assumption that in Islam, the end does not justify the means. The prohibited and wicked means should not be resorted to even though the end itself is noble. Thus, it is not permissible to use any unlawful means in gene therapy or any other therapy except for dire and extreme necessity. There are following important aspects in the fetal gene therapy which need to be taken into consideration. First, the presence of side effect in treatment. Presence of side effect does not prohibit from the use of the treatment unless the side effect is overwhelmingly present. Second, if the introduction of a new gene supplied by another source than the husband and the wife into the uterus of the woman affect the blending of the ancestor. Third, if it is legitimate to donate a gene for treating or curing the hereditary disease. Farooqui states that the man is not the owner of his limbs. Hence, it is not allowed to him to sell any of his limbs to another against reimbursement or without return as a gift. Fourth, finally, fetal gene therapy falls in the category of need, in which there is no immediate threat to life, so the clause of dire and extreme necessity could not be applied to the situation. Hence, its use is prohibited. According to Professor Arshi Farooqui, the stance of the Sunni school is exactly the same in this situation, and there is no difference in their decision for the fetal gene therapy. However, the complexity of bioethical discussion within the Muslim community demonstrates that defining what is moral or ethical is not always clear-cut. The advances in the field of diagnostic medical genetics have undoubtedly facilitated the treatment of hereditary diseases and the counseling of the person at risk. Early diagnostic techniques, including genetic screening, have shown the potential of genes in predicting future health and in the early treatment of several diseases. Since it's now possible to determine the degree of deformity, a large amount of ethical questions concern the feasibility of selective abortion. Genetic counseling is quite a new field. According to many Muslim scholars, a genetic counselor should explain the outlook for a child with abnormality and describe what treatment might be necessary. Parents should choose whether to prepare for a child with disability or to end the pregnancy. The new techniques of prenatal screening, which determine the sex of the fetus, give also rise to further ethical questions. Is the preselection of the fetus sex permissible from an Islamic standpoint? As Dr. Vardit Rispler-Chaim convincingly demonstrates, the question is not clear-cut. There are serious medical, religious, social, and economic reasons for the need of select a particular sex. On the other hand, several Muslim scholars oppose the preselection of sex, and their arguments look to me as convincing as the arguments of those who support it. However, the preselection of the sex of the fetus will never be a widespread common practice for several reasons, including the high cost of treatment. The risk that these techniques are available only to the rich cannot be overlooked. And my first question would be, how do Muslim scholars supporting the preselection of fetus sex deal with this question? Do they propose any solution in order to prevent that poor people don't have the same right to choose? In confronting with questions such as conception, contraception, status of human embryo, and abortion, Islam have always been pervaded by very liberal and pragmatic thought. This is particularly remarkable if we compare the Islamic stance with that of the Roman Catholics or of some conservative Protestants. In case of the sex preselection, the Muslim arguments for the permission of these techniques derive from general Muslim thought concerning bioethics. On the other hand, they seem also to legitimize a patriarchal society, which favors sons as they were perceived as the breadwinner, those who protect the family's honor and continue to bear the family's name. And I would ask you, Vardit, do you think that Muslim scholars supporting sex preselection are influenced by a patriarchal view of the society? Reproductive medicine has considerably developed in last years. An infertile couple can ask for homogenic or heterogenic insemination. Insemination can take place in vivo, intrauterine, or in vitro. Direct intracytoplasmic sperm injection is possible. Extracorporeal insemination is then followed by an embryonic transfer, most often of numerous embryos. Those can be selected after genetic screening for disease or sex. They can also be frozen for later procedures. A surrogate mother can carry a child for another couple. As it is well known, Muslim medical ethics do not allow heterogenic insemination, neither surrogate motherhood. Questions are also raised in how far infertility treatment means interference with God's power and will. Although it is clearly stated that it must have been God's will if a couple stays childless after treatment, Muslim couples are allowed to seek medical help for infertility, as God has also sent a remedy for every illness. Taking this as a starting point, there are many questions to be posed. How should infertility treatment centers be organized? How should legislation look like? What are the consequences for embryonic research or for frozen embryos? Is the embryos reduction permissible? In his paper, Dr. Eskandarani offers an insight into the regulation and organization of the centers which dealt with Arshi in the Gulf Cooperative Council states. He underlines as the shortcomings of legislative regulation and proper guidelines gave rise to an ethical and legal concern and could have resulted in some malpractice. He called for a more comprehensive legislative act and a statutory body detailing all aspects of RT code of practice. And my question is, are the Gulf countries working in order to enact both of them? Which are or which could be the religious, social, and political reason which prevent Gulf countries from enacting them? Thank you very much.
I would just ask, because Ersilia addressed both of you directly, that you should answer briefly to her questions, and then we can open the floor for discussion.
You want me to answer first, or? Okay. Before I answer your question, because you raised an important issue. You said because jointly with Professor Chaim about the sex pre-selection, and I couldn't talk about that issue. First of all, when you talk about the sex pre-selection, the poor, you deny the poor to come forward to have the sex pre-selection. I have to tell you something, 3 important points to start with. Let alone the sex pre-selection, let them have a child of their own. That's the most important, because as you know, al-mal wal-banun, money and offspring, zinatul hayat ad-dunya, which means, of course, the money and offspring, children, provide the joy of life. So let them have, first of all, a child. That's one thing. And of course, if you talk about the poor, he or she, the couple could not afford having a treatment. That's one thing. Second, when we deal with the technology, Professor Chaim said that you met a professor who said to you that the success rate of probably having the X and Y, when we do it in the lab, which is for gender selection. They come and ask, and we don't really put it in the menu a la carte, you want a boy or a girl, but we get pressurized. Do you offer this? We say, well, we try to say no, but only medical ground. But at the end of the day, we do. And the success rate with doing separation X and Y is about, it's not really 95. When the columns, we use certain columns, it gives us about 70% or so in total. And it's not guaranteed. What we opt for, of course, better, which is PGD, pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, using FISH technique, fluoro in situ hybridization, and this is FISH technique, can give you not 100%, because any test cannot be absolute. There is always a margin of error for the test, and sometimes you could misread it. So it probably give you, we would say, more than 95%. So regarding that, that's a comment. You asked me the question about what the GCC countries are doing about it. Now, Saudi Arabia passed a royal decree about almost 2.5 years ago about the rules and regulations and the policies. But so far it has not been implemented. That's why there is quite ambiguity. You ask the gynecologist in one town, what do you think of the guidelines from the government? One answer totally different than the other gynecologist who's next door. And you find it's interesting, the embryologist and the gynecologist, they give you 2 different answers in one center. So if these guidelines are not explained and practiced properly by the actual people who are involved, what about the public? You understand? So yes, there are rules and regulations, but not be implemented well, and we are waiting for it, and we hope to be implemented soon. In Bahrain, luckily, I'm in a committee that they have actually raised the issue and finalizing this rules and regulation, and it will be passed by the government soon to be stipulated. But the other 5 GCC countries, they have not yet. So in other words, if you would like to actually make an IVF center, all they ask for is that you have a gynecologist, you have embryologists, let's check them, the center, and that's it. But no rules and regulations as such details of the actual practice and inspections and supervision. So we would like to see it coming and to be implemented properly. That's the first part of the question. I don't know what is the second part.
No, this was the question. The second part was if there are any reason preventing to enact such code. Any social reason, religious reason, political reason, and so on.
No, there are no reasons actually to prevent the code. It's just that we have to have actually team bring forward these issues. We have to have actually ethicists to come and present it to the government in a pragmatic way and guidelines and follow it. That's why I would not call it a committee, because a committee is a transitional, but I call it an authority or a body that always there permanent. They can come and check and inspect and give informatics and so on and so forth. So that's what we are hoping for. Thank you.
You've asked me two questions. One about the price of those tests. Are they available only for the rich? Well, even in America, I think I was quoted that it is $2,000, $3,000 a test. I don't think every American can afford it. So I think it will become more available to others if the prevention of genetic diseases would be emphasized. Then maybe a public national health system would carry it out, if that would be the purpose. And the other
question was if the Muslims could deal with this problem. The problem of the cost.
The cost?
Yeah.
They just mentioned that it may cause a schism between the rich and the poor, but I'm asking in parentheses, but isn't it the case with other things anyhow?
That's true.
I mean, all heart transplants and things like that, the poor would stand in line and the rich would go to another country and buy the organ. So I think that's not different than in other parts of the world. That would be my guess. Then you asked me if the Muftis are influenced by patriarchal ideas. I don't want to blame them, but there was someone else who already quoted that in the world until today, in the parliaments, the legislators on the abortion issue and on artificial insemination and everything anywhere are still, the majority of them are males. So I don't think you can disconnect the person from his body. So I don't think they are not aware of human rights, and they don't try to improve the situation and status of women, but they are males.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We have a few minutes left for the discussion. I don't know, maybe we should collect some questions, or do you prefer to have them answered immediately?
Thanks to the panel for these excellent talks, and as I especially thank to Professor Chaim, to Vardit for writing the first Islamic medical ethics book in English. When I first saw it when I was a PhD student, and I thought that, oh, it's excellent. So when I went to see the book in the Manchester University Library, so we are Mancunians again, I saw that it's a collection of Fatwa Hunter. But I think we should clarify things, and please correct me if I'm wrong. There is not such a thing as Islamic medical ethics or Islamic decision on a particular issue. These are just the opinions. We should also. I would like to refer to the previous talk of the Mr. Chairman. We should question the structure and formation of these councils. There are just a few people from a few countries coming together and making a decision which is unbinding to anyone, and which are usually wrong because they are just scholars of Islam or religion. They have to rely on what doctors or scientists say, and they mislead them. They are wrong on the time of installment. They are wrong on brain death time criteria. They were wrong on this creating surplus embryos. They were all wrong. Therefore, we should emphasize the self-consciences. Is then Davis then myself telling right? self-consciences. You ask your fatwa to your heart. This is one of the biggest things in Islam. Therefore, please do not take these things. You can, as you wrote in your book, Vardit, you can find different fatwas from one end to another. Therefore, we should. I haven't read or listened any scientific article from Muslim countries, from Islamic Muslim scholars, who criticize the decisions of these councils. And how do you? Thank you.
Maybe Farhad, like you.
I just want to make a comment. It's a criticism of contemporary bioethics, which now is equally applicable to what is going on in Muslim discussions. Bioethics, and this has come up already, contemporary bioethics has tended to focus on things like gender selection, stem cell research, etc. But those are not really the issues that affect the majority of the populations, whether they are Muslims or not. This issue was raised this time in the IOMS, where they were criticized that if you look at Muslim populations, there are other things that need to be taken care of ethically, whereas we spent 3 days talking on genetic engineering and human reproduction. So the same fallacy, the same trap in which contemporary bioethics has fallen and has not turned to things like public health and general issues, Muslim ulama and Muslim physicians are following in the same path. And if we look at some of the discussions we've had today, we're doing what the issues that are being discussed here is what contemporary bioethics is doing. So this is a criticism of contemporary bioethics and the Muslim ulama and the fuqaha and the physicians who are following the same path. They're reacting instead of looking at their own issues.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions?
As a member of the conspiracy of the wrong, I have a much more mundane question for you, Dr. Eskandarani. One of the concerns I had as you presented your survey data, and we didn't get a chance to discuss this outside of the conference, is there seems to be perhaps a bit of a social desirability bias where people are, I mean, everyone sort of strongly agrees that, yeah, we need more regulation. I'm wondering perhaps if how many organizations would be willing to say, you know that we are anti-regulation with regards to this. I do not know the social or political culture of sort of institutions in the Middle East such that they might be anti-regulation. I mean, there's a strong libertarian streak here in the United States that would accommodate people making those comments in public. Do you have a sense of what I'm getting at? And sort of.
Well, with regards, if I understood you correctly, I mean, there are no independent organizations as such, except, of course, what it is the Rabtat al-Alam Islami or Islamic League on certain issues, and the body of the fuqaha, the jurisprudence. But with regard to the regulations in general, these are because these are medical, purely medical, and of course looked upon from religious, from ethical and religious point of view. Because let's be frank with you. I mean, in the Middle East, in the Islamic world, the ethics stems from Islam, and of course there are in terms of general morals and ethics, but it's stemming from that. So that's what it's based on. So with regards to rule and regulations, it's left really to the ministries of health to make sure that these are the regulatory bodies. This royal decree, as I said to you, in Saudi Arabia and also now in Bahrain, it's going to be a royal decree. This is left to a body that is organized by the Ministry of Health that involves religious scholars, by the way. They involve religious scholars, social workers, medics, whether it is clinicians and also scientists. So, and this is a body that will regulate that. But independent, no, I don't see any independent except what it could be a controversial issue. That's something else. So I hope I answered your question.
Is there any other question or comment? Because otherwise, I think we could go into the coffee break and meet again here just at 3 o'clock. And I thank once again all the presenters. Thank you.